Welcome back to the Below Average Joe's MMA show, the second installment of the State of the UFC June 6th, 2024 edition. If you are new to this channel or new to this series, this will be the second installment. The first one came last month, and it basically is a monthly episode that I will drop here on the YouTube channel that will go over, or that will drop, I should say, after each UFC pay-per-view, and it will cover every single event in between each pay-per-view. So this will cover UFC St. Louis, UFC Fight Night headlined by Barboza and Murphy, and then UFC 302. And then it will restart, and there will be 4 events covered in the next one, which will come at the very end of June or the very beginning of July. Basically, I will just touch on the numbers from each card, how many fights there were, finishes versus decisions, how many fights per division, and then touch on how the rankings were affected after each card. I will then go over the pound for pound rankings, the totals from all of the cards combined, what debutants in the UFC got victories during this span of events, and then cap it off by what events will be followed in the next edition of this series. So if you're still a little bit confused, feel free to go check out the first one that dropped in May, and if you're still confused after that, then just keep watching this one. So we will start by breaking down the numbers of UFC St. Louis. This was headlined in the heavyweight division by Derek Lewis and Rodrigo Nascimento, St. Louis, Missouri, in the Enterprise Center. So this card featured 12 fights in total with 4 knockouts, 1 submission, and 7 decisions. So 5 finishes, 7 fights that went the full 15. There were 2 fights in the heavyweight division, 1 at light heavyweight, 2 at welterweight, 3 at lightweight, and then 1 fight in the featherweight, flyweight, women's flyweight, and women's strawweight divisions. There was a decent amount of movement in the rankings following UFC St. Louis, but only in 2 divisions. We start in the heavyweight division. The big boys capped off the card. Derek Lewis was ranked number 12 coming into this event, and Rodrigo Nascimento was ranked number 15. Nascimento did not face any movement from his loss, but Derek Lewis did climb 2 spots to number 10 in the division. The number 10 ranked Tai Tuivasa, as a result, dropped to number 11, and the number 11 ranked Jairzinho Rozenstruik dropped to number 12 as a result of the Black Beast Derek Lewis getting his record-extending 15th UFC knockout. And in the light heavyweight division, this one actually aged very well. Carlos Ulberg was unranked heading into this card before he knocked out the number 11 ranked Alonzo Minifield in what just took 12 seconds. As a result, Ulberg went from unranked to number 11 and now finds himself in a co-main event spot of a Conor McGregor pay-per-view card. At least, hopefully, a Conor McGregor pay-per-view card. I'm recording this on Wednesday, June 5th, so if something's come out by the time you're watching this, or by the time the video even drops, that's why I said, hopefully, a Conor McGregor fight card. But he's stepping in on short notice to replace Khalil Roundtree, who had to remove himself due to a suspension that he had due to a tainted supplement that he has taken. Now Ulberg, who had just entered the rankings at the beginning of the month here, will be fighting against the former champion and top 5 ranked Jamal Hill, looking to get the biggest win of his career, extend his win streak to 7, and maybe be next in line for the light heavyweight championship. And then number 11, Alonzo Minifield's win streak came to a close, and he dropped 2 spots to number 13. And as a result, the number 13 ranked Azamat Murzakanov bumped back to 14. The number 14 ranked Dominic Reyes dropped back to number 15, which is semi-important because he is fighting this coming weekend at UFC Louisville. And then the number 15 ranked Ryan Spann dropped to the unranked spot of 205 pounds. So that's the fight numbers and ranking movements following UFC St. Louis. Now let's jump right into UFC Vegas 92. It was headlined by Edson Barboza and Lerone Murphy in the featherweight division. This went down at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. This card also featured 12 fights, and it had 4 knockouts, 2 submissions, 5 decisions, and you're probably thinking, well, that's 11. That doesn't add up to 12. Well, that is because there was one disqualification on this card due to a headbutt. So that gets us to that magic number of 12. There was one fight in the light heavyweight division, one in the middleweight division, two at welterweight, one at lightweight and featherweight, two at bantamweight, one in the women's bantamweight division, and three in the strawweight division. The featherweights main evented the card, and as a result, there was some movement. Lerone Murphy extended his unbeaten streak throughout his professional career and in the UFC by putting on a masterful performance against Edson Barboza, and as a result, he climbed from unranked to number 11 in the featherweight rankings, and the number 12 ranked Edson Barboza at the time dropped 3 spots to number 15. And the number 11 ranked Bryce Mitchell dropped to number 12 because of Lerone Murphy skipping in to that 11 seed. And how about this one in the strawweight division? Angela Hill, at 39 years old, still getting the job done, got the first submission victory of her 30-plus fight professional career, and she beat the number 9 ranked Luana Pinheiro in the second round, 4 minutes and 12 seconds in. Angela Hill was ranked number 12 coming into this fight, so she rose 3 spots to number 9 and cracked into the top 10 of the division. Luana Pinheiro dropped her second straight fight and dropped 3 spots in the rankings, so those two flipped places. Luana now sits at number 12. The number 14 ranked Yasmin Lucindo actually rose a spot to number 13. She flipped spots with Michelle Waterson Gomez, so she went from 13 to 14. And then Jillian Roberson came from unranked to number 15, and the number 15 ranked Karolina Kowalkiewicz, former title challenger, dropped out of the rankings to unranked. And last but not least, we will finish this discussion with the UFC 302 headline with a lightweight title fight between Islam Makhachev and Dustin Poirier, Newark, New Jersey, the Prudential Center. And it's only fitting that this card also featured, you guessed it, 12 fights. 3 cards discussed in this edition of the series. All 3 had 12 fights on the card. This one, very decision heavy. There were 3 submissions, no knockouts or TKOs, and there were 9 decisions. So a very long night. The judges were busy. And I think the busy night got the best of them because there were some pretty ugly scorecards. Luckily, no one got robbed at the end of the day. There was 1 heavyweight fight, 3 middleweight, 4 welterweight, 2 lightweight, and then 1 in the men's flyweight division and 1 in the women's bantamweight division. And this one, there was not really any movement whatsoever. There was 1 division and basically 2 fighters that were affected. The number 1 ranked middleweight, Sean Strickland, did defeat the number 7 ranked former title challenger, Paulo Costa, in a split decision. Don't get me started on how it was a split decision. A 49-46 Costa is one of the worst scorecards in the history of the UFC, definitely in the history of the duration of this podcast. But I digress. Sean Strickland did get the win that he should have gotten on all 3 scorecards. Paulo Costa, as a result, went from number 7 to number 8, and the number 8 ranked Nassourdine Imavov jumped to number 7, which again, similar to Dominic Reyes earlier in the discussion, is important because Imavov is not only fighting at UFC Louisville this coming weekend, he is in the main event spot versus the number 4 ranked former title challenger, Jared Cannonier. So that's it for all 3 cards, the number breakdown and the ranking movement. Now let's look at the pound for pound rankings as they sit on Wednesday, June 5th of 2024, the day that I'm recording this. We'll start with the men's pound for pound rankings. There was one random bit of movement down there. Number 12, Charles Oliveira. Number 13, Tom Aspinall. I don't know why they hopscotched. Maybe it's because Oliveira has fought Islam Makhachev before, and Islam got a big win at UFC 302. Maybe that could be the reason, but it's kind of odd because Tom Aspinall is about to be in an interim title fight next month, so why is he moving spots? Anyways, other than that, there was no movement. Islam Makhachev couldn't climb any higher in the pound-for-pound rankings because he was already number 1 coming in, and he's still number 1 coming out. And as you may have expected, there weren't any big-time players or movement happening in this latter part of the discussion for the women's divisions. And that being said, there was 0 movement in the women's pound for pound rankings. So Alexa Grasso still sits at the top of the mountain at number 1, and Macy Barber, the women's flyweight on a 6-fight win streak and newly announced to be main eventing in July against Rose Namajunas, caps off the list at number 15. So from the pound for pound rankings, we will go to the totals where we will tally up all 3 of these cards and give the final numbers. We had 36 fights. All 3 cards had 12 fights on each. 3 times 12 is 36. Basic math, I've still got it. We saw 8 KO TKOs, 6 submissions, 21 decisions, and a 1 disqualification. We can't let that disqualification go by the wayside. So in total of those 36 fights, we saw 14 finishes, which comes out to a 38.9% finishing rate. That's about 7% lower, if I'm not mistaken, compared to the last edition. I believe in the first edition of this series, it was 45 or 46%, something like that. So there were a lot of decisions, a ton on that UFC 302 card, which definitely skewed these numbers. In total, we saw 3 fights in the heavyweight division, 2 in the light heavyweight division, 4 in the middleweight division, 8 in the welterweight division, 6 at lightweight, 2 at featherweight and bantamweight, and at flyweight for the men. And then in the women's divisions, we saw 2 fights at women's bantamweight, only 1 fight at women's flyweight, and 4 fights in the women's strawweight divisions. So out of all of those, the division with the most fights over the past 3 cards was the welterweight division, coming in with 8 total fights out of the 36. And the division with the least amount of action was the women's flyweight division, with only 1 fight out of the last 36 going down at women's 125 pounds. UFC debutantes that made a splash over these 3 cards. There was literally only 1 UFC debutant that fought on these cards and got a victory, and that happened at UFC Vegas 92. Umar Sy, undefeated from France, defeated Tuco Tokos via submission 3 minutes and 43 seconds into the first round. You got to watch out for this man in the light heavyweight division. He looks like he's chiseled out of marble, excuse me. I believe he's 10-0 with 8 finishes, 4 knockouts, 4 submissions. Umar Sy is someone to keep your eyes on at 205 pounds. And next up, the next edition of the State of the UFC, we will discuss UFC Louisville, which is currently headlined by the number 4 ranked middleweight Jared Cannonier and the number 7 ranked Nasruddin Imavov. UFC Vegas 93, headlined by the number 5 Alex Perez and number 13 ranked flyweight Tatsuro Taira. We then go to the first ever fight card in Saudi Arabia for the UFC. It will be headlined by former middleweight champion and current number 3 ranked Robert Whittaker and the undefeated Wolf, the number 10 ranked Khamzat Chimaev. And last but not least, fingers crossed on this one, UFC 303, the return of Conor McGregor. He will be facing the number 6 ranked lightweight Michael Chandler. This fight will be happening at 170 pounds. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We will be having one of these videos at least once per month following every UFC pay-per-view, where we just go over the numbers and the ranking movements after each card. I think it's a really fun concept. I hope you all enjoy it. Give me any feedback or critiques you have. What could be added? What could be taken away? Anything in between. And if there's any other ideas that you would like me to dabble with in terms of content here on the channel, please be sure to let me know. Any and all feedback and support is greatly appreciated. You can also expect weekly breakdowns and previews of every single card, the biggest storylines of all of the best fights. I recap the most meaningful results every week and give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. Be sure to join the community on social media at the BAJ MMA and follow on your favorite audio platform. If you like long form podcast episodes, they come out every Friday and Monday on Spotify, Apple, and many more. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next video.